Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for sticking with me through some very long videos about making jewelry in the middle of the desert. Today I am at Pyramid Lake and excited to talk about this incredible high desert jewel. So I'm trying my best to keep you guys kind of sheltered. It is super windy out here. It's middle of August. It's like 90 degrees outside. I thought we could jam out here and do a pretty quick video on the shores of Pyramid Lake, which is about an hour north of Reno. But it is like, I guess this used to exist in Vegas, but I guess it's a Reno thing now too, where it is monsoon season in the desert and it is rainy and stormy and unpredictable and windy. And it's, like I said, super hot, but it is also super duper windy. Look at this awesome view. Storm's really coming in down there at the southern end of the lake, and then up there on the northern end it's looking more clear, but it is definitely very windy out here. So Pyramid Lake, which is where we're at today, is one of America's largest desert lakes. So there's Lake Mead down in southern Nevada, which is the largest man-made lake in the country. And then there's Lake Powell and plenty of other desert lakes, but this one at Pyramid Lake lies squarely on Native American land and is managed by the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. And like I said, it's about 30 minutes to an hour northwest of Reno. And here you can learn about Nevada and North America's oldest human histories, catch a 20-pound fish, learn about the hundreds of birds that migrate through the region and stop on that island, Anaho Island, and much more. All kinds of camping. There's amazing photography. There's so much to see and do here, all in the space of a single afternoon. So there aren't many lakes like this around, at least in this region. And like I said, it belongs to the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, which has the second largest tribal presence in Nevada by population and the largest reservation lands. This entire Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe reservation is nearly 500,000 acres. And it's occupied by, like I said, the Pyramid Lake Paiute, who calls themselves the Kwiwi-Takata, which means trout eaters in Paiute. So they've lived in this area for thousands and thousands of years. Its English name, Pyramid Lake, was given by John Fremont, who rediscovered the lake in the 1840s. And he was really a famous explorer for discovering a lot of the West, a lot of the Great Basin's features and landmarks. And he, of course, named it after the pyramid-shaped Tufa formation, which is actually right across from me over there. It's blocked by this other island, but it is a true pyramid formation. And it's interesting because there's theories about this, even this lake being the start of mankind, and that pyramid inspired the other pyramids in the world, like the pyramids of Giza. I'm not sure that that's true, but I do know that some of the oldest human history ever recorded has happened in this Pyramid Lake region, or this northwestern Nevada region, and like even up into Oregon. There's the oldest petroglyphs that have ever been discovered in North America, which are right around this reservation at 14,000 years old. Also, the oldest human remains to be discovered in North America were right in this region, kind of over by the Humboldt Sink. So it's no secret that people have been living here for thousands and thousands of years. So speaking of thousands of years ago, Pyramid Lake is the largest remnant of what was called glacial Lake Lahontan. So like 20,000, I think 21,000 years ago, right around then, this ancient prehistoric sea essentially covered all of northwestern Nevada. So it was called a lake, but it really, like I said, was massive. It covered like the entire northwestern region. And then as temperatures rose and water levels dropped through the years, it created different separate pools of smaller bodies of water. So some examples of that ancient Lake Lahontan body of water can be found at Lahontan State Recreation Area, which is like east of Carson City. That's a state park, state managed land. And then there's Walker Lake, which is kind of down by Hawthorne. And then the largest remnant of ancient Lake Lahontan is, of course, Pyramid Lake. So this is a huge, massive body of water, and it's cool that it's so connected to such an ancient history. So one of the reasons that Pyramid Lake remains so healthy, other than the fact that the tribe maintains it and monitors it, is because it's a terminal lake. So it's crazy because Pyramid Lake is connected to Lake Tahoe, the largest alpine lake in America, and the Truckee River connects them. So it flows 120 miles down from the Eastern Sierra through Reno, past Wadsworth, and deposits into Pyramid Lake. I think one of the more amazing things to me about Pyramid Lake is that every single time I'm here, I've never seen it be the same 2 shades of blue. It's actually pretty magical. I mean, I'm going to show you some other pictures of it, but every single time I'm here, this lake looks different, and I'm positive that it's because it's coming from Lake Tahoe, flowing 121 miles down the Truckee River, and depositing into this lake that has its own mystic qualities. But it is really cool how it seriously has never looked the same 2 shades of blue every single time I've been here. That and the lake turns over a couple of times a year. Like if you hear locals or especially like pro fishermen talking about the lake turning over, that basically means that the surface temperatures are cooler than the water below, and the denser water sinks through the lake's water column and kind of like recycles it. But this lake is absolutely a special place. I mean, it's all thanks to the tribe, who's never lost control of managing this lake, despite John Fremont trying to take it over, and then a bunch of really unruly, just downright asshole pioneers up in Virginia City trying to take it over and instigating some pretty heartbreaking wars through the years. But I mean, when's the last time you've really seen a lake like this and there aren't like a zillion condos or homes on it? It's pretty amazing. And it's all thanks to it being completely under tribal control, and they do an amazing job at managing this place. There's a couple of communities that surround the lake. There's Sutcliffe, which is on the western side of the lake. You can kind of see it right over by those trees. And that is a reservation land where you have to be a tribal member to live there. And then on the very southern end of the lake, there's also a community called Nixon. And yeah, also tribal members live down there. So those are the 2 main communities out here, Sutcliffe and Nixon. So all around Pyramid Lake, you can't come to Pyramid Lake without stopping at one of these crazy Tufa formations. You might be driving around the lake and at first glance see what you think are just like rock outcroppings everywhere. But the closer you look, the crazier these formations are. And there's always these like really, can you guys see up there? There's like a really cool cave up there. Anyway, this is absolutely a feature of Pyramid Lake and some other desert lakes. There's some over at Winnemucca Lake, which was formerly full of water. Now it's mostly a dry lake bed. And then Mono Lake, which is really famous for its tufa columns. But a lot of the time, tufa like this is found around alkaline lakes that have a pH that's 7 or higher. And it, to me, always kind of reminds me of like, almost even like coral. So it's pretty cool how this was underwater at some point and all of these rocks formed. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So they say that the pyramid formation is also entirely made out of tufa. I think the tribe says that the pyramid formation is 400 feet tall. Like, look how crazy this looks. It's so cool. So the pyramid is on the eastern side of Pyramid Lake. It's right over there. This is called Anaho Island, and it's like right behind that. And we're on the western side of the lake right now, which is the only place that non-tribal members are permitted to visit. So you have to have a day use permit or a fishing permit, which you can get in Nixon or Sutcliffe. But people who are non-tribal members are only allowed to be on the lake's western edge. And that's because there are so many sacred sites that are on the eastern side of the lake, including the pyramid and also what's called the Stone Mother, which is another sacred tufa formation. So there's a bunch of different versions of this story. And like I said, this kind of stuff makes me a little bit uncomfortable talking about because it's not my history to tell. And it just feels like, you know, it would be more meaningful if it came from a tribal member, or if you learned it directly from the folks who are managing the Pyramid Lake Paiute Museum. So definitely go there and connect with them because that's really important. But I think probably one of the most mainstream versions of the Stone Mother is it's a sacred place because it's rooted to the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe's origin story. So the most common version is about two children who were basically separated to different parts of the lake for constantly fighting and misbehaving.
They were instructed to build a fire for 4 nights in a row each night, and the mother would be able to see the smoke from the fire and know that they got to the place that they needed to be. And she was able to see the smoke from the children that went south, but she didn't see smoke from the fire of the children that went north. And she became very, very distraught and sad. And so she sat and cried and cried and cried. And so it's her tears that formed the lake. And she sat there so long that she turned to stone. And she still sits there today. She's located on the east side of the lake by the pyramid.
So this formation out there, I'll include a picture of it, is really cool because, again, it's made in Tufa, and it's of the Stone Mother sitting there weeping on the eastern edge of Pyramid Lake, and there's her basket even at her feet, which is also made out of Tufa. So definitely go to the Pyramid Lake Paiute Museum. There's so much cool history there, and like I said, it's so much more appropriate and meaningful if you can learn a lot of these stories, especially the origin story of Pyramid Lake, from a tribal member. So definitely check that out. So the pyramid is off limits, the Stone Mother is off limits, the northern edge, which is where the needles are, which is another like Tufa formation and some natural hot springs geysers. Those are all off limits, and the entire eastern shoreline to non-tribal members, which I think is appropriate because the reason that they were shut down, which was like in fairly recent history, is because of vandalism. So people were going out there and graffitiing the pyramid and the Stone Mother, and so the tribe just said, we're shutting this down. So you're not even allowed to go within 1,000 feet of the pyramid or the Stone Mother or the needles or any of that because they are sacred sites and completely off limits to non-tribal members. So Anaho Island is so cool because it's a national wildlife refuge, and together with Stillwater and Fallon, it makes up this like 3-part complex that puts together a national wildlife refuge, one of Nevada's 7. And it's because of resident and migratory birds, which is really cool. So they fly through this area and depend on the water. And then in Anaho Island's case, it's managed by the National Wildlife Refuge together with the tribe, which is really cool. So the tribe definitely plays a major part in this. And you're also not permitted to go near Anaho Island. But I think there's something like 280 different bird species that pass through and use that as a breeding and nesting ground, including the American White Pelican. Pyramid Lake is the largest breeding ground for the American White Pelican in the United States, which is so cool. So chances are most days you're out here, you'll see a giant white bird in the water and think, is that a seagull? And realize that it's a freaking pelican, which is so cool. So I think we were hoping to do some silver work out here today, but the clouds are really ominous. Now you can't even see the northern end of the lake at all. And it's just way too windy. So I think I'm gonna maybe try to go check out the museum, wrap it up in my garage. And I'm really excited because the necklace that I'm gonna be making in this episode, excitingly enough, I'm working with PBS Wild Nevada to host a show about Pyramid Lake. So I will be making this pendant and wearing it in the episode, which is so cool. I have a piece of Ackerman Canyon Variscite, and to me it looks just like the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which is the huge salmon trout, as John Fremont and his explorers called it, that is endemic to this lake. It lives here and nowhere else, and it's Nevada's state fish. So hang with me as we move to a less windy location and make this awesome fish-inspired pendant. Okay, it's the next day. Welcome back to the absolute unmistakable chaos of my everyday life. The weather is fine today. It's absolutely sunny. Today would have been a great day to go out to Pyramid Lake, but tomorrow we are filming this episode at Pyramid Lake with PBS Wild Nevada. So I'll be back out there and can show you guys some more nice weather conditions of Pyramid Lake. But I have to bang out this pendant so I can be sure to wear it in the episode, which I'm really excited about. So you can see I do have some home field advantage with my silver bench here, which is just a table in my garage. But you can see why I don't ordinarily film in here, because my garage is a hot rod shop for this 1968 Chevy Nova that my husband has been rebuilding for the last 20 years. And we're currently in the midst of painting this car. So yeah, you can see I have about 1 foot of room to roll around. Otherwise, I just knock a door or a fender or a hood or a trunk or something off. So welcome to the chaos. So I'm super excited to make this Nevada Ackerman Canyon Variscite into a pendant. The second I saw this thing, I was like, oh my God, that absolutely looks like a fish. And celebrating Pyramid Lake and the Lahontan cutthroat trout, Nevada's state fish, there's no better chunk of turquoise. Let's make a necklace. So you can see the setup is a lot more easily workable compared to being out in Nevada, but it is a lot more chaotic in here. So I'm gonna primarily be working right here, and I'll have this other camera set up for some closer views. But yeah, if you guys ever have any questions about the process, definitely be sure to let me know in the comments. I can try to provide different angles if that would be better. But yeah, I'm excited to make this guy into a pendant. So yesterday we talked a lot about all of the amazing sacred qualities out at Pyramid Lake. That place, I'm not kidding, there's something about being there. It's different every single time. The water always looks different. You always kind of get this special feeling out there. It's kind of hard to describe, and I think the best way to probably go about experiencing it is just going there. Like I said, it is about 45 minutes from my house. I live in kind of the central part of Reno, so you can make it up there super quick in a little day trip if you're in the Reno Tahoe area. So yeah, definitely recommend just go up there and check it out there yourself. So like I was talking about, the Stone Mother and the pyramid formation are totally off limits by non-tribal members. But there's still so many ways to appreciate seeing them from across the lake, and even better, learning about them from the Pyramid Lake Paiute Museum and Tribal Center, which is in downtown Nixon. So I'm just gonna solder this bezel together. And drop this guy in the pickle solution. So I think I was talking a little bit yesterday where we left off before the wind swallowed us up about the birds that are out there. The American White Pelican, there are so many of them depending on what time of year it is out there. And they're so cool to see. Talk about a freaking prehistoric bird. Those things are huge. Like I was saying, you might sometimes see them and think, okay, well, is that a seagull or some kind of a stork, or what am I seeing? And they are migrating through the region and like I was saying yesterday, nesting on Anaho Island out at Pyramid Lake, which is super cool. Really, really neat to see if you're in the region. And there are plenty of them that are basically coming and going. You can see them nesting at places like Washoe Lake. You can see plenty of other birds out at Stillwater National Wildlife Refuge, which is ranked of global importance for migratory birds in the region. So you can definitely see plenty of those without making a trip to Anaho Island. They're all over Pyramid Lake. I'm just going to stamp the back of the silver plate. Here we go. And I got to do it on my silver bench instead of whacking it on the back of an axe this time. Look at that. It'll focus. Coyote and some mountains on the back there. So Pyramid Lake is freaking huge, you guys. It is ginormous. It's almost the exact same size as Lake Tahoe, and people honestly have no idea about that. And I think that partially that's because there's so much of it that you can't have access to. I mean, rightfully so. As I was explaining last night, a lot of it has been shut down due to vandalism. And even when I was there yesterday, there was some graffiti on those Tufa rocks. So it's happening like constantly out there, even in the places that are open to the general public. But Pyramid Lake's 27 miles long and 11 miles wide, and Lake Tahoe is 22 miles long and 12 miles wide. So it's almost the exact same size. Pyramid Lake's 188 acre feet. Lake Tahoe's 191. Pyramid Lake has 71 miles of shoreline and Lake Tahoe has 72. So it seriously is like almost the exact same size as Lake Tahoe, which is crazy. People can't wrap their minds around that. I can't. So they're not just connected by waterway, they're also almost the exact same size. So yeah, I think that part of it is, you know, people can't even begin to understand its size because they can't see it, like that entire eastern shoreline. But make no mistake, it is almost the exact same size as Lake Tahoe. So I made my bezel. I stamped the back of the pendant with my maker's mark. I soldered the bezel to the back plate, and then I trimmed off all the excess silver that I know I'm not going to use. And now I'm basically starting to kind of like rough out the outline of the Nevada, get it like down to as close of the perimeter as I can. So just kind of like that initial shaping. So speaking of shape, Pyramid Lake is pretty much like kidney shaped. So the northern part of it is like way bigger, and then it kind of curves down to this like little tip to a narrower southern end, and that is where the Truckee River flows in. So the Truckee River deposits into the way southern end of the lake, which is nearest Nixon. But that top portion of the lake, you know, that is where the needles are, which I was talking about a little bit yesterday, another tufa formation with some hot springs activity up there. The Stone Mother, Anaho Island, all that stuff's on the eastern side of the lake that's off limits. Okay, so now I have this twist wire that I'm gonna shape around the outside to give it a little bit more appeal. So I'm super excited to be out with PBS. We have seriously dreamt about working together for a really, really long time. And we're gonna be talking with a couple of really great people out at the lake, mostly tribal members. So we're gonna be out in Wadsworth, which is pretty much like the gateway community to Pyramid Lake, really nearby Fernley. And the Truckee River flows right through there, which is kind of a good entry point because you can see where it's flowing right through and then kind of like orient yourself into the reservation with the path of the river. Okay, now I'm just gonna solder this bezel, the twist wire. Back into the pickle. So also going on at Pyramid Lake is this really cool scenic byway that goes all the way around the lake. It starts no matter which direction you approach the lake, whether you're coming from Reno on Pyramid Highway, whether you're coming from Wadsworth, or even from Gerlach. There's a lot of the scenic byway that connects down that way as well. But I was trying to do some research on this. I think that it is one of the first, if not the very first scenic byway in all of America, which is really impressive. I had no idea that that was the case, but I think that there was some kind of major statistic about that it was designated one of America's first scenic byways, which is really cool. But there's some really beautiful vantage points that are, like if you're coming out of Nixon and going up to Gerlach, there's this vista that makes it feel like you're flying, which is really cool. So definitely check that out. I think that there's some information about it at the Pyramid Lake Tribal Museum. There's like a plaque that explains, you know, more information about it. So while you're at the museum, definitely check that out. So there's a couple of fish that are endemic to the lake. One of them is the kiwi fish, which, as I understand it, has kind of always been like a bottom feeder type of fish. It lurks on the bottom of the lake, and it is kind of brown and speckly, kind of a prehistoric looking fish. I guess like most fish, right? They're kind of creepy looking. It is endemic, which means that it lives in Pyramid Lake and can nowhere else in the world. So it's from there, only lives there, can't find it in other places around the world, which is pretty cool. I think the tribal members are allowed to fish it during certain seasons, but it is a protected species and not available for other anglers to catch. And then there is the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which is so cool. John Fremont, when he rediscovered the lake in like, what was that, the 1840s, he and all the other people that went to live in Virginia City and Mayan Nevada's Comstock Lode called it the salmon trout. So it's also an endemic fish that is found in Pyramid Lake. And not many other places, but it's native to that area. And I'll say not many other places and tell you why here in just a second, but it is native to the lake, really special, sacred creature. And of course, there were thousands and thousands of fish that had thrived and supported the tribe for thousands of years. And then when the pioneers came to the Comstock to live up there, they basically overfished the lake. So that happened. And then also, like, you know, by the turn of the 20th century, fishing was like a mainstream recreational opportunity up there. And the fish basically became so overfished that it was like completely extinct. There were no more fish, which was, I mean, imagine being a society that had lived in Pyramid Lake for thousands and thousands of years and used this as a life source. And then somebody came and stole your land and completely overfished all of your life source. Like, that would have been absolutely devastating. And that's what happened. I mean, from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, many decades there were no more Lahontan cutthroat trout in the lake. But then in like the late 1980s, I think, if I can remember correctly, there was a biologist who was up on Pilot Peak, which is really close to West Wendover, Nevada, way on the Utah-Nevada border, all the way across the state. And Pilot Peak's like one of Nevada's most ultra prominent peaks. If you see it, it's just like shoots right out of the ground. But he was out there studying the Bonneville cutthroat trout in that region and was able to discover an original strain in a creek of the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which was like this crazy, groundbreaking situation. I mean, imagine how exciting that would be. So yeah, it definitely makes me wonder if, you know, all the way on the other side of the state there like that, like barely surviving. There's, I think if I remember correctly, researching this a long time ago, there was like barely any creek flowing, tiny, tiny, tiny little stream. And then there was a Lahontan cutthroat trout in it, which is just nuts. So it just makes me wonder if, you know, back when glacial Lake Lahontan flowed over most of northwestern or northern Nevada, if that's how one got up there. I don't know. There's probably a way more scientific explanation to this. But back when it was one body of water, I mean, maybe that's how it got trapped up in that peak. Anyway, they rediscovered this, which is totally nuts. Imagine how exciting that would be to discover that another strain was alive somewhere. So amazingly enough, the biologists were able to take this native strain of Lahontan cutthroat trout down, bring it back to the hatcheries, and slowly cultivate it and reintroduce it back to the lake, which is nuts to me. Can you imagine? That is so cool that happened. So then, like, over the next few decades, they basically spent a bunch of time, you know, making sure that they could slowly reintroduce this trout back to its native homelands. And then, of course, people were not allowed to fish there recreationally for a long time until they could basically restabilize populations of this endemic fish. But these fish, there's a reason that the, Fremont and the first white people, Anglo explorers who showed up in the region called it a salmon trout. If you look back at some of those pictures from the 1930s, I mean, when there were dude ranches and divorce ranches out at Pyramid Lake, people were holding up the craziest freaking trout you've ever seen. There's a really cool picture that they have in the Pyramid Lake Museum that is Clark Gable when he was out at Pyramid Lake filming The Misfits with Marilyn Monroe, holding these gigantic trout that were like, I mean, he's like a 6-foot man and he was holding them at his waist and they were the full length of his legs. It was crazy. So yeah, these fish were huge, way bigger than they are today. So basically, like over the last few decades, they've slowly been cultivating these reintroduced Lahontan cutthroat trout strain to their home habitat, and they're getting bigger and bigger. I think that the world record Lahontan cutthroat trout was something like 41 pounds. It was either 42 or 41. Like, can you imagine catching a fish that big? That's huge. I think it's totally common though for anybody to go there during fishing season and catch a Lahontan cutthroat trout that's like 20 pounds in size, like any day. I mean, they're getting back up there. When I was talking with somebody from the tribe the other day, she was saying that now they are able to track that. I think one of the trout that was caught recently was like 26 or 27 pounds. So they're getting back up there. But it is crazy because I think, today there's so many reasons to go to Pyramid Lake, but the world-class fishing is absolutely one of them. I mean, when else are you going to be able to catch a 20-pound trout? Like any day of the week. That's not a special conditions thing. That's like any day of the week. It's crazy. So now I've made my outline of my bezel, soldered the necklace like little loops through it so you can hang it on a chain. And now I'm gonna drop it in the pickle for the last time. So normally I do this in a coffee mug out in rural Nevada. I gotta say, it is absolutely way easier to be making this at my house. Kind of an interesting twist, especially since we're gonna go back into rural Nevada for this episode. And then I have this rock tumbler that I use lately. I've been using as a polisher. So in here is just some polishing media and soap and water. Drop that bad boy in there. So while we're waiting for that to polish up, which is another luxury that I don't have in the field that's making this way easier to do at my house, less interesting but easier. So the fish are, of course, there's like a very specific fishing season. They have this very controlled. There's a couple of hatcheries that are up at Pyramid Lake, which are worked mostly by tribal members who monitor the water quality of the lake, as well as the health of these fish. So they make sure that the spawning is happening and control a lot of these native trout populations. It's still in an effort all these decades later to make sure that the fish can stay around for the long haul. So there's a very particular fishing season. I think it starts in October and runs mostly through the winter months. And the interesting thing about Pyramid Lake is that there's this shelf that's right on the shoreline. So like it's super duper shallow, at least on the side that non-tribal members can go. That's the only side I know of. I don't know about the conditions on the eastern side, but I think it does this all the way around, where it's like really, really shallow for a couple hundred feet out into the lake. And then it just drops drastically, like dozens of feet. And people have gotten into some trouble out there where they've drowned or not known of this because there's an undertow that's right on the bottom of that ledge, so people can wade way out, fall down there, get sucked into this like undertow that's happening down there. But that is where the Lahontan cutthroat trout like to hang out. It's right down there on the edge of that ledge. So it's really popular at Pyramid Lake to fish on ladders. So if you go there during fishing season, you'll see people way out there and like, what are they standing on? They're ladders. So they drag a ladder out way to the edge of that shelf, stand on top of it in waders, and then fly cast out there or just drop their line down on that shelf, and that is where people most likely have their biggest successes in catching the Lahontan cutthroat trout. But of course, like any fishing, it's regulated. You can only keep the fish if it's a certain size. And the tribe, I think, very strongly believes, at least on some of the shoots that I used to produce and working with the tribe, you know, they are very like catch and release. You know, it's really important for the survival of a lot of these fish, and most people don't eat them. I mean, you can, but so it's definitely better in my eyes for catch and release anyway, to keep this amazing world-renowned trophy fishing even possible out there. And it's so funny because I can remember, so years ago when my grandfather was still with us, he actually died from Parkinson's, and before he left us, his mobility was still like kind of starting to fail him. My dad took him fishing out at Pyramid Lake because he loved fishing. They're from Nebraska, and they went out there to go fishing on these ladders at Pyramid Lake, and he cast the line way out there, caught a gigantic Lahontan cutthroat trout, and as he was pulling it in and kind of like fumbling around a little bit with the line, he dropped it and it fell into the water, and all of a sudden this freaking pelican came out of nowhere and swooped it up and ate it right in front of my dad and my grandpa. I think to me, one of the things that I love the most about Pyramid Lake is that it is just so mysterious. You know, like a lot of the rest of the Silver State, there's just so many secrets that still remain as such out there, and it's in large part because of the tribe and they're guarding their history, which is really neat. So I just always like that being out there, there's something I learn every single time. There's something that I am always inspired by being out there, which, you know, there's a lot of places in Nevada to learn from, but there's something completely undeniably special and sacred about Pyramid Lake. Where else in the single space of an afternoon can you catch a 20-pound fish, learn about some of the oldest cultures in North America, and go on one of America's oldest scenic byways, all in a lake that's connected to the largest alpine lake in America? It's really a cool place. And the Lahontan cutthroat trout, what a cool species. So I hope you guys liked my Pyramid Lake inspired Lahontan cutthroat trout pendant. Be sure to tune into PBS's Wild Nevada episode where me and Chris Orr are going to be exploring Pyramid Lake with a couple of really incredible tribal hosts here. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to another Nevada silversmithing adventure. If you like the type of content that you see here, if you guys wouldn't mind liking the video and subscribing, it really, really supports what I'm trying to do here and keep it going. So until next time, thanks guys.